All right, we're live. Hello, Brett. Very good
Hi,
to see you
Rainey.
this
Good
evening.
good evening to you. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for really agreeing and saying yes to share with us all of your experience this evening. I'm really excited to learn from you. Seriously.
Likewise, I was really honored when you asked me to be on your program, and it's great. And I know that I have some of my great friends from Singapore, where I've lived 3 times in my past, tuning in as well. So it's great to be here.
Right, and then I can see from my screen, my LinkedIn screen, that we have already some friends coming in. First of it, Rose Manuel. Rose Manuel is in Singapore. She's a wonderful poet, and Cleo as well. Cleo is a new friend that I have not met before. So welcome, Rose and Cleo. So for all of you who are tuning in slowly, please leave a comment below. Just say hello and just share with us what's your expectation. And if you have any questions that you would like Brett or even me to answer, please feel free to ask your questions. Okay, so it's gonna be very casual and just a simple chat with friends tonight. All right,
Mm.
so allow me to introduce our guest tonight. So on the professional level, Brett has a lot of experiences. I got to read it if you guys don't mind, okay? So Brett is the founder and the CEO of the Packard Network. And Brett grows leaders that grows leaders. He transforms cultures and connect people around the world. His proven methods have saved others years of trials and errors, and due to his extensive international experience and direct access to a global team of professional experts, yeah, he's widely connected. And for nearly 30 years across 30 countries in international banking and wealth management at Citi, Barclays, and the Australian and New Zealand banking group, Brett has run large, complex, high growth businesses and an array of product lines while serving as an executive director on subsidiary boards. As a country and a regional CEO, Brett has successfully transformed cultures, reconstructed and strengthened leadership teams, improved diversity, and revamped faltering businesses to sustain profitability in both benign and crisis market conditions. And Brett also has an established track record of building highly engaged, productive teams that deliver world class client experiences with efficient cost base. Wow, that was extensive and huge. So we are in for a treat, everybody, including me. And more importantly, my experience with Brett and the reason why I decided to really that is a must have to have him in this hard talk show is because I get to know Brett from LinkedIn virtually, and when he first show up on LinkedIn, he was like a newbie, and he even told me he's a newbie. And when I look at his profile, yeah, this guy is new, right? So who is he? But over the time, he was so consistent. He show up consistently, and he has been always very kind and very giving in terms of his words in building people up. Everywhere I go, that's what I see, and he is consistent. And that to me is it shows me that Brett is the leaders that truly grows leader that uplift people, and he really walks the talk. And I like people who walks the talk, not just talk about it, but really walks the talk. Yeah. So thank you, Brett. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Rainey. That's a very kind introduction, and you're right. I agree with all of that. That's just me, and I have my own definition of leadership, and I think you just described a big part of what that is.
Awesome, awesome. So let's welcome our viewers, our guests tonight as
Mm.
well. We have Jennifer in the house. We have Joseph Gonzalez, and we have Kieran. And yeah, Joseph says that he is a giver and a doer to all. Yeah, absolutely agree. All right. So Brett, let's go into our first question tonight. I have prepared some 4 questions for you to share with us.
Okay.
So this is my first one.
Okay.
It
Let's
sounds
do
big,
it.
right? So I'm really curious. I'm really curious to hear what is your biggest career or your biggest life setback, and I want to know how you feel when you're going through it. What was the obstacles, and how does it make you to become a better leader as you face your challenges and you learn from your lessons? So that's my
Hmm.
big question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's wow. That's a big one. Well, I would say that so I had a 30-year career, corporate career, and had the opportunity to work across 30 countries, living in a couple of handfuls of countries. So I would say that the biggest setback, which was also the biggest learning for me. So it because I also believe that when you have a setback or a down period, that's when a person, at least for me, that's when you learn the most. And this happened to me in 2000. It happened to be 19 years into my career. So I had 19 years with the same company. It was Citi that you mentioned. And Citi had a very unique ecosystem. And I was great. I was one of the best. I'd worked in Asia extensively. A couple lived in Singapore a couple of times at that point. Lived up in Japan for 6 years. Um, um, uh, uh, Worked in North America. Obviously, that's where I started from the U.S. And so I had worked my way up by mastering a lot of managerial skills and sales process management, um, managing compliance, managing risk, managing many different things that I was really good at. And I was 5-star execution. I was never a perfectionist, but I was able to really, Rainy, get my arms around a problem, tackle that problem, and look for the next one. They're really good at that. So, what happened? And that's the backdrop. So, I had accepted, I was contacted by a former boss with Barclays Bank in the UK, and this person convinced me to go. So, I went after 19 years. Figured not going to be a problem. I've been doing this. I'm a master. And why go? Well, it was an opportunity to lead a couple thousand people, which I had not done at that point in my life, right? So I had worked with a bunch of people, but never had that many people that I was really responsible for. So I go there, go to Europe for the first time, get there, and after 3 or 4 weeks on the job, I quickly realized for the first time in my 19-year career that I was failing. Why was that? Well, Rainey, I was doing the same things that I was doing for 19 years, but people were not responding to me.
Mm.
So the the same managerial tactics that I'd used around, I'll give you an example, sales process. So sales process is, world-class sales process. I could build it anywhere, and it consists of 6 steps: planning, tracking, coaching, tools, recognition, and performance management. Okay, so I can go into any organization, install that, and I'm really good at that, and get that place humming. It wasn't working. Okay, so I'm sitting there wondering what in the world's going on. So I had a conversation with my boss at the time, who hired me and had a vested interest in my success. And he took me to dinner and he basically said, Brett, you got a real problem here, is that you don't really know how to lead. You're a great manager, but you're having a problem getting your people to engage. And that's why they're
Wow.
not following you.
Wow.
And so I'm sitting here, Rainey, in a big job. It was an MD role, managing director role, responsible for a couple thousand people. I'd given up a 19-year career, right? I was a superstar coming in, and felt about that big at this point in time because my boss had hired me with a new company, is basically saying, you're not cutting it. But he did more than that. He said, if you're willing, let's work together and I'll teach you how to become a leader. So
Wow.
that started with me. And so this is my biggest failure. Okay. The failure was leaving Citi after 19 years. and sinking in quicksand. That's a failure. Now, second part of your question is what's the learning, right? So continuing with the story, he worked with me, and within a year, uh, actually 10, maybe 10, 12 months, I had the place up and humming. It wasn't perfect, but I learned the key principles of leadership. So these are the learnings. There's a big difference between being a great manager, getting things done, doing a job, and actually inspiring people, building a culture, engaging people, and having people follow you. And I learned,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I learned the definition of leadership, and I'll give you that definition exclusively on your show that nobody will find in a Harvard book or any other university in US book, okay? National University of Singapore. Not going to find it there. And
Yeah.
I'm not being critical, but this is my own definition after working in the trenches and what I started to learn back in 2006 in London. And that is that a great leader creates an ecosystem where people feel good and they can perform at their full potential, period. That's
Wow.
my definition of leadership. So I learned that with help, with an open mind, and I learned the difference between management and leadership. You know, leadership is more culture, management is more of a strategy. You can have a great strategy and be a great manager. I had all that, but without the culture to make it work, it's like attempting to drive a car with a dead battery. It's not going to work. It's the same thing as your smartphone. If your smartphone doesn't, we all know what it feels like, Rainy, when we get that new smartphone, right? We get the box and we can't wait to turn it on, right? You've had that
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Said, here it goes. And if you turn it on, if that phone doesn't have a SIM card in it or a computer chip, it's
Doesn't
not
work.
going to work, right? It's not going to work. So you've got to have both. So leadership and management is just like that smartphone. Management is the beautiful piece of hardware. You got to have it. If you don't have the management, by the way, and you're only a leader, that's not going to work either. So you got to have both, and they both work together. And I learned that. That's
Yeah,
my
and
answer. That's
yeah,
my
and
answer for your question. Yeah.
awesome. And I really love your the way you set the distinction. I think it's so true, and I think even as common as it is, I think there's still a lot of other managers out there who does not know the difference between
Mm,
what's a manager and what's a leader. All right, and there's one
right.
thing that I'm also curious about is like coming from such a background. You said you have a successful years, 19 years in the city, and then when you so thinking that you got it all, and then when you went into your new environment and the new culture, and you realize that, oh gosh, it doesn't work. So how did you put aside your ego, right?
Mm.
How did you put aside your ego? I mean, it's not easy for people who are up there and then suddenly to be told that you don't have it, right? So how
Yeah.
do you put aside your ego and being willing to be open and to learn and to build up that leadership skills?
It's a great question because a person's ego can either work to their advantage or disadvantage. And I know why you're asking that question because you and I both have seen a lot of people where the ego works to their disadvantage, right? The
Yeah.
ego gets in the way. I'm too big for this.
Yes.
You know, they need to do it my way or the highway.
Yes.
And that attitude doesn't work in business. It actually doesn't work very well in life either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I learned, so to answer your question, earlier on in my career, back in, I grew up in the 1970s, right? So I'm on the edge of a Gen X and a baby boomer. That's kind of my era. I'm 58 years old right now. In the 1970s, the big piece of technology where I grew up, Rainy, was the radio.
Yeah.
Okay. There was no computer back then. There's no smartphone, no cell phone, none of that stuff, right? And it was a radio. And with a radio, you had to have an antenna to get the signal. And if you have the antenna, you can receive, and the receiver, you can listen and enjoy the radio. So the 1970s was all about that as far as I was concerned, right? And the radio. Now there was also television, but I'm not going to talk about that. I want to use the radio analogy. So to answer your question, why did my ego not get in the way? I learned growing up that if you install that antenna in your life, okay, then you can attract success and nothing should get in the way. So if it rains, you can still receive the signal. If it snows, you can receive the signal. If it's sunny and bright, you can receive the signal. But the weather is going to change. You're going to have the different seasons, and that's very predictable, right? So when winter comes, that antenna better be rigid enough to withstand the rough winter time, right? And so don't just build it for the summer. So I learned with my ego to weather the different seasons. And I know
Mm.
that those seasons change. So today's a very beautiful day where I'm at. It's calm, it's warm, it's sunny. Okay. But I can tell you last week was really windy and there were tornadoes all around on the map. And we're sitting here, my wife and I are dodging tornadoes, hoping that a tornado doesn't hit. And it did not hit, right? But we're sitting there doing it. This is how life is, and this is how your ego is. If you have an ego that's only built for summertime when times are good, you're not going to be very successful because the sun is not always going to shine. Your great
Wow.
country in Singapore, I love the thunderstorms. You get a thunderstorm every day. It's in the tropics. I love that part of Singapore. But guess what? The sun will likely come out every day as well. Okay.
Mm.
And that's just the way that it is. So you better be built if you're going to live in Singapore, prepared for a little bit of rain. And then you can prepare for a little bit of sunshine, right? And you
Yeah.
may get it all the very same day, right?
Yeah.
So that's my answer to your question. My ego didn't get in the way. And because of that, I was able to learn a lot about leadership within a year. Not only get back up on my feet from the quicksand, but get on solid ground. Okay. And then 2 years, 3 years beyond that, I was able to really soar. And it made a big difference to me and ultimately tens of thousands of other people.
That's amazing, and I think
Yeah.
it's because of your willingness to be open and to learn from scratch. Like if you realize you've been told
Yeah.
that you don't have the leadership skills, and then you're willing to just acknowledge that, accept that, and
Mm,
like okay, so absorb like a sponge. What can I do? What do I need to
right.
learn to pick it up? And within a year, then you start to get it. So I think
Mm,
that's so cool. Yeah, and Joseph makes some of an interesting comments here as well. That for most organization, transitioning from an old culture to the new culture, it starts from the top. They must engage all
yeah.
employees, ask questions, and in order to get real answers. And the people must be involved in the process. Yeah, I totally agree with this. I feel, but what is your take about this, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, it does start from the top, and I guess the question always is that there's a lot of leaders out there. It's true, it must start from the top. There's a lot of leaders out there that want to be successful, but so let's say the CEO of the company might not be very good, right? There are those situations. So I would say a lot of it depends on, okay, how you define the top.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a leader, so Joe's absolutely right about that. It does start from the top. But let's say you're a leader in an organization. I'm just going to challenge that thinking for a second. You're a leader in an organization and you've got a CEO up there that's not real good, but let's say it's more likely a he, which is part of the problem, that it's not a she, but he is in the good old boys club with the board. There's a lot of situations like that in the US, right? And let's say that you've got a bunch of leaders underneath that need to survive this issue, right? So these leaders should define the top as stopping with them. They should look at
Ah,
themselves as a top and don't sit there and, oh, I got a bozo CEO. I don't get support. So, sure, That's important. I'm not discounting the importance, but you have to do what you can to grow. Now, these people can all leave if they want, but that's not necessarily a prudent thing to do, right? So they can actually grow when they have a bozo as a CEO, right? So if that in that particular scenario, the leader should look at themselves as a top. And then so what Joe says is absolutely correct, but it's all a matter of perspective and how you're looking and how you're defining the top.
Right, and I think that's really great. What I get from you, the point is that everyone is a leader, and it has to start
Yeah.
somewhere, and it has to start from us. And
Right.
if everybody within the organization starts believing that they are also a leader and start doing their part, I think there's a lot that can be done and can be
Mm.
created out of that. Awesome.
There can
All right.
including getting rid of that CEO in the example that I'm talking about. So, if you because if I as a leader am working for a subpar CEO but I'm not focused on that subpar CEO. I'm focused on my leadership, my team, the company, the community, the customer, the employees. I'm focused on all the right things and being relevant, highly relevant to all of those stakeholders. I don't need to worry about what that CEO is not doing. Okay. That'll take care of itself.
Right. Gosh,
Yeah.
that's so true. It's just
Mm.
focusing on what we can do, just basically what's within our control, basically. Just focusing
Right.
on what's right. All right,
Mm.
awesome. And then I'm gonna move on to our second questions.
Mm.
And for all of our audience out there, feel free to just jump in, share with us your comments, your perspective. We would love to learn from you as well. This is like multi-way learning together, right? And we
Mm.
will also, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. We will answer it as and when we go along. Okay.
Mm.
All right. Our next question is this. So I'd like to know, what did you learn from leading the teams through the back end of all the crises, the Asian financial crisis, the 911, the global financial crisis, as well as the latest observation during the pandemic crisis. Wow, there's
Mm.
there's a lot of crisis throughout the years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what? You're right. It's winter. Winter keeps coming, right? So you get this severe winter, and it's not always rosy in the real world, right? You've decided, these crises that you've talked about here were major, right? So you mentioned three plus the pandemic, and uh, so it's reality that when times are good, I had a boss from New York one time that he always told me, he said, Brett, the case of the rising tide. And I said, what do you mean? Well, when the tide is up, all the boats are up. Everybody does well. When times are good, when markets are good, everybody makes money, right? When the economy's strong, everybody's doing great. But when that tide falls, okay, most everybody falls with the tide. But those that understand adversity and how to survive the winter, okay, and the harsh realities of a crisis, those are the people that they don't survive, they thrive. So you've cited three crises: Asian financial. I got so back in 1998, 1997, the Asian financial crisis hit, right? So everybody watching this is very Asian heavy, the audience today. My favorite part of the world is Asia. The Thai baht, okay? There's a problem with that currency back in 1997, and we all know what happened. It wasn't good. But Asia, being quite resilient, was able to bounce back from that faster than other parts of the world that would be hit with a similar crisis. So that was great. But at that point in time, I was called. I was in the U.S. There was reorganization, and I lost my job. I was
Wow.
basically not fired, but I was basically made redundant, my position. So the good news was that within, I don't know, a 2-week period, I got a phone call from one of my ex-bosses who was in Asia at that point in time and saying, hey, why don't you come over here and interview? We need somebody to come build a sales process on the back end of the financial crisis, Asian financial crisis. So that was my opportunity to actually go from being a U.S. typical person, domestic focus, to what turned out to be an international global banker. So that crisis was responsible for the opportunity I had to learn the career. So let me answer your question now. Whether it's the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, I was in London, and 9/11, I was in Tokyo, in Japan at the time. What did I learn? I learned that the best way to handle any crisis, and this advice I'm going to give your viewers and everybody watching this, even on replay, applies in life as well. So it's not just business. But the good news is you're hearing right here on Rainey's program, I'm about to reveal how you can thrive in any crisis. You're going to hear it right here on Rainey's program. And it's something called an adversity quotient, AQ. Everybody talks about IQ, EQ. You could go all over LinkedIn today. You could do a scroll on your newsfeed and find people talking about empathy. Yep. And that's important. It's really important. EQ, the other parts of EQ are really important. So is IQ. You got to have a brain. I mean, we all have a brain, but you got to use it. IQ is important too. I'm not the guy, I understand all of that stuff. But if you really want to talk to a doctorate in EQ and IQ, I'm not the person. I can find the doctorate for you to talk to if you want a list of people. I can give that to you. But I'm not the expert in that area. I know how to use that to be an effective, relevant leader. But I am an expert in AQ, adversity quotient. How does a human being handle adversity using something that Jim Rohn called, for example, the best way to look at adversity, look at ants. If you want to see the busiest species on planet Earth, look at an ant. In the summertime, they are so busy preparing for the winter. Or a squirrel. A squirrel is preparing that food and burying it in the ground for the winter. They are working when the sun is up, okay, to prepare for the dark time, okay? So having an AQ, back to your question, an adversity quotient mindset, without getting into the formula, you want to have a high AQ. You don't want to have a low AQ, okay? So I'll talk about that now. What does it take? 3 things here on Rainey's program for all of you to take note. Write this down. Number 1, whatever the adversity is in business or in life, don't blame yourself for the problem.
So no blaming. That's number 1. Okay.
Don't blame yourself. Number 2, don't blame anybody else for the problem.
No finger pointing as well. Okay.
And this, by the way, is a huge reason why most people can't handle adversity. They're blaming other people.
Yeah.
No, number 3, equally important, understand that this issue can be dealt with and is limited in duration. It's not going to last forever. Now, with this type of mindset and these kinds of activities, okay, going on in your mind, so you're not blaming yourself. A lot of people blame themselves for the world. It's raining outside. It's my fault. You know, a lot of people may say, you know what, I messed up. It's my fault. And they beat themselves up for years. Okay. The amount of focus and energy that takes means that they can't handle adversity. So they sink right along with the other boats when times get rough, right? So applying an AQ, let's talk about the pandemic. Okay, let's bring all this stuff from the 1970s current. Okay. So here we go, Rainey. So the pandemic hits, right? Okay, how do we apply an AQ mindset to this? Number 1, let's not blame anybody else for what happened. Okay, don't blame whatever the cause of this was, and we still don't know what that was. Don't blame the fact that you have to wear a mask for some parts of the world. In Asia, we wear masks, right, all the time. It's natural for us to wear a
Yeah.
mask if we get sick. It's polite also.
Mhm.
But different culture, let's stop blaming people. Let's not blame the government. Let's stop blaming each other, and let's not blame ourselves. If we get sick, let's don't blame ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
stop the blame game. Okay, if I'm running a business, and let's say it's a travel business, and the pandemic hits, okay, well, my business just dried up, okay, just overnight. Don't blame the pandemic. Think about, if you spend time blaming the pandemic, then you'll spend a lot less time figuring out what can I do to recalibrate and to lever technology, okay, to get my business ready when this thing is over with, right?
Yeah.
It's a mindset type of thing.
Yeah.
So this is the answer to your question is to drive your own in a simple way. I told you how, 3 steps to drive a mindset that you can handle adversity with how you approach any situation, just like those ants getting ready for winter.
So it's
Okay.
always being prepared for winter, and
Yeah.
also take away all the blaming game, whether it's blaming self, whether it's blaming others, get it out of
Yes.
the way.
And understand it's not going to last forever, because guess what, Rainy? After winter comes what? Spring
Spring. My
and
favorite
summer,
weather.
right?
I love
So then the
spring.
cycle starts all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what we're starting to see happen. I mean, Singapore's opened back up, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
government there, great government of Singapore,
Yeah.
amazing government. And you talk about a relevant government. All of
Yeah.
you watching that aren't familiar with Singapore, look at Singapore. Okay,
Yeah.
look at Botswana. Botswana down in southern Africa used to model itself after Singapore. Botswana is the country of diamonds. Okay. I oversaw the largest bank in Botswana for a few years during my time in Southern Africa. So you look at relevance, you look at the pandemic, and you start to see that there's a recovery now from the pandemic. Okay.
Yeah.
So have an AQ mindset is my advice to everybody. Don't just look at IQ and EQ.
Yeah, awesome. And I think in this, we always talk about the VUCA
Yeah.
economy, right? So I think increasing the understanding and of having the adversity quotient, and also increasing that capability, I think that will really help us to ride through this all these changes, all these uncertainties. And I think as we keep growing, as the world keeps evolving, right, it's just gonna get more and more. All these uncertainties is just gonna get more and more, and it's just gonna get more volatile as well. So
Mhm.
having that flexibility and the mental strength to be able to know that, okay, there's gonna be a lot of uncertainties coming my way, but to trust that no matter what happens, no matter what setback or challenges, I know that uh, the best has yet to come. That this too shall pass, and I'm gonna emerge bigger, stronger, better. And I think looking back, there was also that one mindset that really got me through my crisis as well. So thank you. So I think at the end of the day, right, whether it's in terms of professional life or personal life, the mindset is still the same thing. It's applicable to everywhere we go.
It is. And I actually, at this point, it's easy for me to say this in hindsight, but it's actually true. I actually prefer to operate in adverse market conditions
Okay.
because I know that I can lead teams more effectively than 99% of other people.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And Marvin was just sharing with us that AQ is dealing with setbacks and rising yet and again and again.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
also
Great
Dale,
point.
as usual, I always love his sharing of proverbs. Yeah, I
Yes.
always love his proverbs. So he said in Proverbs 6, Solomon says to look at the end. They exhibit foresights by getting ready for seasonal change. Wow. All right.
Yeah, that's
So
powerful, Dale. I
yeah,
appreciate Dale. Dale always. Everybody should be following Dale Young.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
If you're not, right?
Yeah,
He's
and
brilliant. Yep.
yeah, and he's really he's always everywhere as well, and he's always so uplifting. I
Yeah.
always say that people like you, people like Dell, you guys are like my gem, the gem that I found on LinkedIn. All
Great.
right,
Thank
now
you.
let's move on to our next question. Now I have this is the third last. I have another one question that I
Okay.
really must ask you. Okay,
Sure.
hopefully we can finish it within the 1 hour time slot. Now, how do you handle office politics, especially the one with blaming and pushing responsibilities away culture? Now, to be honest, we have a lot of this kind of culture. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter whether it's a private organization or whether it's the government or the government related organization. So you have climbed through your career, you have gotten to the top position, but I want to know, like, when you were like still like at the beginning or at the middle of your career, right? I'm sure you face with a lot of office politics, right? So how do you handle that?
Yeah.
I have
Mm.
to be very honest. This is
Mhm.
I'm very bad with this thing. I'm always be the
Right.
one that is gonna step from behind and don't know what to do about it. So how do
Hmm.
you deal with this kind of thing? I want to learn from you.
It's a great. It isn't. This is a great question, Rainey. I mean, you are a brilliant person. I'm glad you bring up tough subjects like this. I mean, this is a difficult question for a lot of people, right? I'm going to
Thank
answer
you.
it. So the first, because it's not the kind of thing you don't learn this in university, right? You don't
Yep.
learn how to deal with it. So you can learn all the content, learn all the skills, but where do you learn office, how to handle office politics? Well, your viewers are about to learn, from my perspective anyway, on your channel, how to do that. So the first thing I would say is I just have to go off the top of my head here. Don't ignore office politics. Okay, there. So the biggest mistake anybody can make is saying, "Oh, I don't like those office politics. That's just not for me. Hey, I just want to do an honest job, get my work done. Please leave me alone. Let me do what's right for the company and the customer and my
But you
colleagues."
can't.
And
You'll be
and you
involved. You'll
can't
be dragged
because
in.
right. So, but that is a majority. You must admit, Rainey, that is a majority attitude with a
Yeah.
lot of people going in
Yes.
until they've been stabbed in the back,
Yes.
right? Or there's this backstabbing or people making up things and doing things that would equate to bullying in school,
Yeah.
as an example. Okay,
Yes.
so the first thing is don't ignore it.
Okay.
Okay, learn about it. Okay, people watching this program right now are taking their most valuable asset, time, and they're learning now about how to handle office politics. So you've taken the first step on how to do it that way. I would say this is my advice on how to deal with it, Rainey, and it's a deep subject. We can't cover it all now, but I would say number one, stay true to yourself. Always be authentic, no matter whatever the debate is, no matter what people are doing to you behind your back, whatever. Be authentic, right? Be a listener, okay? Listen to people, including the people doing the stabbing. A lot of times the way to handle an aggressor at work that's creating a political situation that's distracting and impacting your productivity. Sometimes being quiet, not too quiet, by the way, but letting them talk 80, 90% of the time. And what you say 10% of the time can have huge impact. Now, I didn't say, listen carefully what I said. I didn't say let them talk 100% of the time and you never say anything. Okay. So it's very important, but think about a 90-10 rule. Okay. You're going to let these troublemakers, let them talk 90% of the time. So if you're in a meeting where this is going on, let them talk 90% of the time. Make sure though that you're going to have a voice for the 10 minutes. Okay. I think that you've got to, in that 10% of the time that you're talking, show empathy. Okay. I'm getting into a little bit of EQ here now after talking about AQ, but you need to show and demonstrate okay, during the 10% of the time that you're talking, and they're talking 90% of the time, noise and all this stuff as well. You're doing your work. You know that you're doing your job, but somebody's creating some waves that kind of interfere, some radio interference, getting back to my
Yeah.
radio analogy.
Yeah.
Let's
Especially
just
in blaming and pushing responsibilities.
Right. Yeah, blaming and
Mhm.
pushing responsibility. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that radio antenna Brett talked about from the 1970s. We're going to move it a little bit. And we're going to point it a slightly different direction because we've got interference on the station. Static. We're going to get rid of the static. Okay. Many of you watching this may not even know what the heck I'm talking about, but what's this dinosaur talking about? But with a radio, if it's not tuned perfectly, you're going to get this static noise or a fuzzy picture, right? So we want to fine tune it, make it sharp, make it look like it's an HD color, like this video that you're watching right now of Rainey and I. So show some empathy towards the person causing the trouble for your 10%. Okay. Don't attack them, but show some empathy, right? Do your work, do your listening. I would say also assume, because this stuff, Rainey, can make a person paranoid. Okay. And they can make a person feel that, I have no chance to succeed here when this happens. But don't fall into that trap, because that's often what the person wants you to fall into. They're doing this for a reason. They're doing it because people that cause trouble are fearful.
Mhm.
They're afraid. They're
Yeah.
scared to death. So what they
Mhm.
do is they create these office politics to distract you from what you're doing. Don't fall into the trap and get distracted.
Okay,
So
Dale,
yeah,
Brett, I'm still
go ahead.
confused because so I hear you that
Yeah.
we are to when there is this blaming and pushing of responsibilities happens, right? Let's say in the meeting, right? So we are going to apply
Yeah.
listening as well as having empathy. All right. But how does that helps us in terms of dealing with this situation when there are people who comes in and pushing the responsibilities and putting the blame to us when we feel that we have done whatever that we could. So how do we
Hmm.
handle that with that listening and empathy? How does that help?
Well, what it helps is that the reason why I'm emphasizing listening and empathy with them is that I'm making an assumption that the aggressors in this case are afraid,
Yeah, it usually
and
is.
I'm
Right.
going to expose that fear with this approach. Okay, and once that fear is exposed, they're going to stop. They'll either move on to somebody else, or they're going to get exposed with the bosses and they'll self implode. Basically, I don't need to. I don't need to attack them, and so you know I'm gonna take the high road, Rainey, is what I'm saying with them. So I'm gonna take the mature what I've learned in dealing with office politics, and I've been through I've learned the hard way, right? So I'm skipping ahead 30 years here,
Wow.
in hindsight on what I've learned and summarizing it. It's a deep subject, but I've learned that taking the high road wins. Okay, may not feel like it all the time, but if you can my goal in handling office politics to to manage it, because you can never get rid of it, okay, but to manage it is to have the person that's the aggressor expose themselves for what they are.
Is it what you
And
mean? Is it like something like, when you let them talk a lot, then it can come out, right? They may say the wrong thing. Is that what you're saying?
that's part of it, and
Like
part
letting
of
them
it,
expose them.
and eventually, this is assuming that I'm doing my job, right? We're assuming that I'm doing the
Yes.
work, right? And I'm
Yes.
productive, and so I have the confidence that I'm doing my job. But
Yeah.
now I'm having to deal with all this stuff as well, because they're pushing stuff and all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
yes, my objective in keeping my mouth shut 90%, because For the people that get angry, they wind up talking 90% of the time, and then the politics just consumes them, and then it's a miserable situation. I'm saying keep that mouth shut,
Mhm.
okay? Let them go frantic, right? Let all of this stuff go out there. Take the high road. Listen, okay? Show a bit of empathy in what you do, that you understand that this is important. Your bosses will see this, okay? And then what you do is that 10% of the time that you can talk, that's where you're taking the high road, okay? You can toot your horn, you're doing your work. You can toot your horn to say something like, Rainey, what else would you like for me to do in this situation?
Wow.
So I'm doing my job. I'm doing all this. You've been talking now for 25 minutes, right? About this as well. I've been sitting here listening to you. So I understand that you're upset, you're pushing a bunch of stuff on me. What else would you like for me to do? Do we
Wow.
need to get our boss involved? What? Because then you've taken the situation, Rainey, and you've turned the table a little bit, and you're not on the offense, but suddenly they're on defense, and they'll crumble quite quickly. And the reason they will is because the root cause of why they're doing this is they're afraid, and you're starting to expose. They don't. They're kind of operating on quicksand, to use my earlier analogy. They're
Yeah.
not on solid ground. That's why they're
Yeah.
doing this in the first place.
Yes.
That's what I would say. It never goes away though. So you can't just do what I'm saying and then it's going to go away, but it's an effective way to manage it. It's a tough issue. That's why you're asking the question. But take the high road. Keep your mouth shut 90% of the time. But the 10% of the time you talk, just ask them, uh, so what do you want me to do, Rainey? What would you like for me to do?
Oh, wow.
And
I think that's so
so instead of,
powerful.
because there, what Rainey's expecting me to say here, if you're the aggressor, Rainey, you're expecting me to, okay, let's go. That's
Let's
what you
fight.
want. And instead, instead of even responding to you, I'm just asking you a question. Well, hey, I'm doing my job. What do you want me to do? What else do you expect me to do? You're pushing all this stuff on me. Why are you doing this? What's going on? And guess what? You're a lot less likely to have an answer.
Brett, this
Anyway,
is so powerful.
I don't know if that helps. You asked a tough
Yes.
question. It does not have a black and white answer, but that's my gray answer for you. And based on my 30 years, it works like a charm because it can
Well,
keep these people in check.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think this is very powerful. I wish someone would have teach me all this kind of stuff when I was back then in corporate. But yeah, I think it's very
Right.
powerful that because the common response for people when they are being attacked, when they are being blamed, is to defend themselves, right? And then
Right.
that's how you get into a conflict or argument, right? But the way
Hmm.
you do it is like stay calm, stay grounded,
Yeah.
know your grounds, and then just ask question.
Yep. And do your job. Remember
Yeah.
the assumption we just made, Rainey. Do your
Yes,
job because
yes, yes.
they also want you to not do your job so you'll get in
Yeah,
trouble with the boss,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah,
or you won't get your bonus or whatever, right?
yeah,
So that
yeah.
that is always do your job and take the high road if I'm going to summarize what we just talked about.
Got it. Got it.
Yep.
Awesome. Wow. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep.
Marvin, thank you so much for sharing your comment with us as well. Yeah, I really agree. Sometimes in office politics, the aggressor, they will choose people that they feel they can so-called bully. We call it the bully,
Hmm.
right? And then when they
Hmm.
feel that they're dealing with someone who is difficult to deal with, then they will move on to the next target. So I think at the end of the day, it is
Yep.
important to learn this kind of skill set to be able to deal with people, difficult people like that, and so that we know how to kind of like protect ourselves as well along the way. So thank
Mm.
you. All right, great. We are on time. Okay, audience out there, feel free to share with us your comments and any questions. Feel free to just share it in the comment box. We will answer it as we go. So we can finish our last question here. This is my question. Earlier on, it was someone
Okay.
else's question. Okay.
Okay. Great.
So how can leaders create psychological safety when there is no trust?
Wow, that's a real important question because psychological safety is a big issue now in a lot of companies around the world. And
Yes.
in the US, as an example, right now, what's happening in the United States is there's something called the Great Resignation. And the Great Resignation is happening. There's a lot of highly talented, top performing people that are just choosing not to work, Rainy. And one of the reasons they're choosing not to work is that they don't feel psychologically safe at work, right? A lot of things have changed the past couple of years. The pandemic has changed a lot of things in the world, and a lot of people don't feel psychologically safe. Now, 10 years ago, it was the same thing. 20 years ago, it was the same thing, right? So, psychological safety is like hygiene. It's so important to make people feel safe, to create an environment where people can feel safe and feel that their opinion matters and that their work matters and that they matter as a person, right? So, how do you do this? Number one, as a leader, you've got to create a culture that fosters engagement, okay? Where people can be focused on the job to be done, can be focused on a conversation, be focused in a meeting, and feel as though made to feel as though that they count. Okay, we've all heard the saying that the janitor that works for NASA is also responsible for putting a person on the moon, right? And so is the rocket engineer. Okay, they have the same mission. Okay, everybody plays an important role, so everyone is important. That's one thing. I would say also getting back to empathy again. So show an understanding for people. Create an environment where not just the leader shows an understanding, but you've got to have a culture where the entire team has respect and understanding for other people's opinions. So, as an example, Rainey, if you and I are having a conversation about a topic and you give me your opinion, I can say, I hear you, Rainey. I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I understand. That sends a signal to you, Rainey. If I say, hey, Rainey, I understand why you're asking me that question. It sends a signal to you that I've heard you, right?
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
listening to you instead of just sitting there ticking the box, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
wrote a post earlier this week about ticking the boxes. It's inadequate, right?
Yeah.
To just tick the box, right? It doesn't, because people see right through that. So, what you have to do is fulfill the spirit. Like if somebody needs help with something, okay, get them help, okay? Don't just say, well, I think I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to keep myself busy attempting to get them help. You could be really busy, but maybe the person winds up not getting any help at the end of the day, right? And it winds up consuming everything. So make sure you engage with people, right? I would say have an inclusive mindset, which basically means that it's important to talk about things like inclusive diversity. I talk a lot about diversity. You know this as
Yes.
well. And whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's whatever it is, right? Diversity, I believe that diversity leads to truth in the most efficient manner. And everybody always says, Brett, what does diversity have to do with truth? Well, let me put it to you this way, Rainey. If I hire people just like me and there's bad news, these people that I've hired are going to be reluctant to give me the bad news. So I may not understand the truth because they're withholding information from me because I don't want to hear it. Okay. So if you have an inclusive, diverse mindset, you learn to be open to hiring people different than you, different background, different mindset, different philosophy. And the best leaders hire the most diverse people, and they ensure that they feel as though they count. Then you get the truth immediately. And by operating from the truth, you know this, Rainey, very well. By operating from the truth, um, you're able to build long-term relationships, trusted relationships, much more forcefully and quickly and efficiently than any other way, than operating off of falsehoods. So I would say the last thing I would say in decisions that you make sure that you're inclusive in those decisions. Don't make up your mind before engaging with other people. They need to feel as though they're part of the decisions. If they just feel that they're part of a meeting and a discussion, but you wind up not acting upon what they talked about, that's a big problem. Okay.
Right.
So I would say to be inclusive in your decisions as well
Right.
as your meetings and other stuff. I don't know if that
Right.
helps.
What about so what I hear is that uh, I think your answers will help if we are the one that is at the position of the leaders, right? Now, what if
Right.
it is the leaders that creates the lack of psychological safety? So, for example, I think there was some time back. It goes viral. I'm not sure whether you saw it, but one of the airlines, one of the airlines. I think one of the airlines, their meeting, their Zoom meeting was being leaked out. It's being leaked out, and then this particular staff in the meeting was constantly being put down by their leaders, and it goes viral. Everybody was talking about it, and then when I saw that, right, I was like, oh my gosh, how can leaders do this kind of stuff? And it starts from the very top of them. And so there was
Yeah.
a big meeting, it's a Zoom meeting, and they just keep putting down on the staff and then just laughing at her, and you can see her expression. It was very sad. So how do we deal with this kind of situation when, let's say, we are the employee, right, and our
Yeah.
leaders, our environment are the ones that is creating this? What would you say? How do we handle that? And then also,
Yeah.
would you say that no, we should leave that kind of environment because we can't change it because the environment is like that and it
Hmm.
starts from the top, or what? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So the first thing is don't number one, don't overreact. Um, Number two, and I'll give the same advice that I would give anybody for completely unacceptable behaviors like sexual harassment. You and I've had conversations about that as well, and about actual real life cases where that's happened. Bullying, okay, any type of abuse in the workplace, right? Same advice, Rainey. So first of all, don't overreact, okay, meaning don't panic, don't run out the door, um, but assess the situation, make sure that it's accurate, it's not hearsay. So you've got to, and there's ways to verify, but assuming that, yeah, this is really going on, what you just spoke about, and if this is a leaked video, there it is, right? So this is happening. That's a situation, just like these others I described, that you need to get out of. So the question then becomes, how do I get out of it? Okay, and there's different ways you can get out of it, but if you're in a toxic environment like you've just described, there's other environments out there that are not toxic. So you need to start to work your way um, and get out of that environment. Now, good companies have whistleblowing policies and things like that. Those things are at your disposal. Use those. Okay. Don't expect those to resolve the problem entirely. Okay. Because there's a very high probability that you whistleblow and there's an investigation, and maybe there will be a bunch of memos and stuff like that, but nothing will change, right? So I would um, I would say that if the situation is toxic, to start making your plan for quietly
Exit.
exiting and finding a new role. Now, depending on your financial situation, the timing of that might become important, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe you can't afford to leave, etc.
Yeah.
But seek help on an exit strategy. So reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, and we can point you to. I mean, I know people. I know Joe, who's on your program. He helps people with exit strategies, right?
Which
And
Joe?
he
Oh, oh,
Joe Gonzalez, right?
Joseph.
Yeah,
Joe. Right.
Joseph can help. He has helped people develop an exit strategy that are in a
Wow.
toxic situation. Okay,
Oh, wow.
he knows how to
I
do
didn't
that.
know that. That's so cool.
Yeah. So there are experts out there that can, and I don't think you and I have the time today to talk about how to do it, but I just the answer to your question, get out
Got
if
it.
that's
I
happening
think
as you
this
described.
relates. This relates to my post today. I was just. It's a different context. It's a relationship context.
Yeah.
My post was about the berry tarts, right? That love is sweet. Is sweet. Is joyful. Sometimes it gets sour. It depends on the season, right? If it's the berry type, some berries, some season is sour, right? But you
Yeah.
enjoy the sweet and the sour, isn't it? But then over the time, it can get toxic. So the thing is that why
Mm.
do we let ourselves to keep consuming toxic thoughts?
Yeah. Don't do
Right.
it.
It's
Don't
the
do
same
it.
thing with work environment. If it is toxic, then stop and get out of it. If we know that it's not within our control to change the whole culture, then I think the wisest way is just to get out of it.
It is the wisest way to get out of it. This is what's starting to go on in the US, right? This called the Great Resignation. Big reason why is toxicity in the workplace, right?
Right.
Starting at the top, the situation that you just managed. Now,
Right.
In places like Asia, Rainy, where the culture tends to be, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more quiet, shy, subdued, maybe tolerated. The tolerance is higher. Doesn't mean that people are happy. I still encourage these people, these people to get out.
Yeah.
You've got to get
Yeah.
out of that environment. There are enough foreign companies in a place like Singapore, for example, that do not tolerate this stuff
Oh,
that
wow.
maybe a local company would, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got to think about that.
Awesome, awesome. I
Yeah.
think that's so cool. All right. So we have overshot a little bit by 3 minutes, and I would like to really close this off, and I want to appreciate all of your sharing tonight. I really learned a lot from this. I really hope that we can do this again next time. But really, thank you so much for your sharing with us. And also to all of the audience out there who are
Mm,
sharing with
yes.
us your comments, your perspective, your insights. We thank you for sharing and learning together with us as well. So, with that, we would like to close off today's session. And if you like, feel free to engage, to connect with everyone who are here
Mm.
tonight with all of us as well. And if you can, maybe just share with us what is your takeaway, your one takeaway tonight, in the comments below. And we would love to hear your feedback as well. So, with that, I wish everybody a very good night.
Good night.
All right. So, I'm going to end our broadcast.